ready?
Ready as
Rock and roll.
Stuff.
Y'all have y'all's up like that.
Yeah, we have it where we can hear when we talk.
Yeah, mine's always down though.
Yeah, no, I got to fix it in editing.
Why'd you tell me just to keep it up like that?
That's great.
Just talking to the mic.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
This is going to be on. This is making the cut.
Okay.
Why do you have it pointed at your eyes now? Your eyes are not talking.
Because he does.
See, now I'm self-conscious.
I know.
But it's in my mouth.
Always
it's in
been,
my mouth
It's always
range.
been like down. Yeah. Okay.
Well, all right. Well,
Just give you a hard time.
Please cut that.
We've been doing this for several months, but we're still figuring things out. But we're glad you're here. Thank you for joining us on GPS to God. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe wherever you happen to listen or watch. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, all those kinds of places. Hit the bell to get notified. Please reach out to us at email podcast@parkwaybc.net. Let us know topics you want to hear about. Let us know how great the guests are, and if you want to know more about them, let us know. We'll put you in touch with them. We want to hear from you, so make sure you reach out. New episodes come out every Monday. Make sure you check out our Instagram page and all that cool kind of stuff. But speaking of cool stuff, we have with us today Mr. Brent McDonald. Brent, thank you for being here. Brent and I have known each other for a little while. We met through his son. His son and I worked together, and we met that way, but he is real life Indiana Jones. That's what I like to call him. that's part of his life. But
I was excited when you said that.
That's awesome.
That's how I describe him to people. So he has brought some artifacts for us to look at. But Brent, to start off with, he is the executive director of Cottage Cove, which is a children's ministry, a Christian children's ministry. Can you tell us a little bit about Cottage Cove and what you do there?
Sure. Cottage Cove has been around 27 years, hard to imagine, and we've often joked about being the best-kept secret in Nashville. Most people don't know about us unless they actually have had kids in our program or someone's told them about us. And what we are is a program that helps at-risk kids rise above their circumstances and thrive. And so we have multiple locations. We started originally with one location by the state fairgrounds, and kids come into our program, kindergarten, and stay as long as they like. So we've always said once Cottage Cove, always Cottage Cove, which means that, we can have high school students that are still involved. And one of the things we really like is seeing the kids that have grown up and then come back and help the younger kids again after that. And this summer we had, 3 of the teenagers that were back and helping the younger kids. And I remember when they were in the program, they were in kindergarten and grade 1. And,
right.
That's cool.
But we provide educational opportunities, and with that, it's kind of twofold. Homework, mandatory. If you're in our program, you have to be doing homework, and they can't hide that from us. We have a great relationship with the schools on that. And so that includes tutoring as well. And then, of course, Christian education is the other part of that. And so we teach the Bible, and it surprises people often when they come and meet our kids because they think, inner city kids, they won't have much Bible knowledge. And we actually work through books of the Bible. And so if it takes you a year or 2 years to get through a book of the Bible, you take that amount of time. And if we're talking about the Old Testament or the New Testament, we'll often teach them other extra things that go along with that. Most of our kids at young age know the Greek alphabet or the Hebrew alphabet.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
We don't know that.
No.
I fail.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's the specifics of the program? It's after school, so you pick them up from the school and they come to the campus?
Yes. The one closest to here in Madison, we actually walk with the kids. It looks a little bit like the Pied Piper every day, walking from the elementary school with a whole line of kids. And then some other kids get dropped off. Some of the kids get dropped off by their buses, middle school in particular. But we focus on the elementary school first, start at the youngest age and work on the idea that a lot of the problems, a lot of ministries that are focused on teens are trying to fix a whole lot of problems that would have been better to start much younger.
Yeah.
And so we said, let's start at that youngest age and then hopefully not have those problems.
Right.
And so at our Tusculum location, we actually have to bus the kids there, so all the kids are bused. And then we're working on a third location, which is going to be right across from Glencliff High School. And so we're excited about that one because Glencliff High School, the elementary school, are right across from us, middle school right to the left of us. And so it'll be very easy for kids to stay all the way through.
And what other organizations partner with you through the Cottage Cove?
Well, Cottage Cove is mostly a grassroots organization. In other words, the majority of our support, 80% of our support, is individuals. And so families that get involved, and that's where the donations come from. That 20%, we do one fundraiser a year, and we have few corporate sponsors. Nashville Predators, I have to mention on that. And, they've been involved with us for a lot of years. And then it's really, as I say, people that are saying, this is something we want to invest in. And we stay away from government money, United Way money, and it all comes with too many strings. And, for example, they'll say, well, we'll give you money, but you can't talk about Jesus in the homework room. And it's like, no, we're a Christian organization. If I want to talk about Jesus on the playground, we're going to do that.
Right, right. Go ahead and tell us a little bit about what your fundraiser is each year, your yearly fundraiser.
It's called Open Hands, Open Hearts, and it's in November. It just went by. And with that, it's an evening where good food, meal, musical entertainment, and then we put on a program as well, and it features many of the kids. And probably the highlight out of it for most people is that we do a public speaking class, and it's kind of been one of my pet classes for years. And we teach young kids how to be in a room full of people. And in this case, you could have 200 people at this event. And we had for this year a child, grade 2, that was fully prepared to get up in front of 200 people, present an entire speech without notes.
Wow.
Wow.
That's
Ryan,
crazy.
could you do
I
that?
couldn't do that now. I'm 32.
And as I often say to the kids as we're getting ready for that, you have to know that you're going to have 200 people looking at you going, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Guilty.
Yes. Count me into.
Brent, another thing that you all do at Cottage Cove is called Christmas with Dignity. Can you tell a little bit about what that is?
Like a lot of well-meaning organizations, years ago when we first got started, we knew there was kids that weren't going to be able to have Christmas, so we wanted to be able to do something to help them. And we had basically an event where it was strangers giving gifts to the kids. Well, the problem was Christmas morning comes, mom still doesn't have anything to give her child. And so how does that help mom? And so we said, we've got to change that. And so it's been 24 years now, and we created Christmas with Dignity. And the idea behind it is that it's a store. And so the parent gets to come and shop. We try and provide everything you need for Christmas. And by everything you need, that means socks, underwear, the winter coat, all of those basic necessities, some household items as well that they can use for the whole house. And then you want to have stocking stuffers. But, the thing is the little items are what the family can sometimes afford. And so that's not the key for us. The key is that item that they go, there's just no way that's ever going to happen. And, one of the best examples of that was a mom that was new in the program. She was in Madison, and she had never been at Christmas with Dignity, so she had no idea what it was. And, as much as we tell them what it is, but they still seriously don't get that until they actually walk through the door. But her son had said to her, he wanted to have an electric scooter for Christmas. And she said, never going to happen. It's just in the financial situation they were in. And so she just had ruled it out. And when she comes in and she's greeted and someone's explaining how it's going to work and how you get to go through, and she's looking over the shoulder of the person who's talking to her, and there's a whole row of electric scooters sitting right there. And she just bursts into tears.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so her son had an electric scooter for Christmas.
And so I have been there. I've been blessed enough to be there and volunteer there before. And you take volunteers to come help work the store, but you also take gifts and things as well, correct?
Yeah, and we've got some partnerships that are allowing us, like this year, socks and underwear, regular clothing. I don't need any of that right now. We have all we need for that, and it's just been amazing how that's been provided for throughout this year. So really right now, what we need are toys and those items, the bicycle or things of that sort. And so we start gathering that. Have been now for a couple of weeks. We'll be doing that right up until really, the store's December 11th up till December 10th, preferably before that because it helps us be ready.
Right.
And Brent did bring a flyer, so we'll put that up on YouTube, and we'll also put that on our Instagram page. So if you can help, all the information is there. You can read about that and help a great program who helps a lot of families and does it in a really great way. So
hopefully this year, at least the families of 230 kids is what we're aiming for.
Wow. Wow.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it is.
How is it as far as like getting into, you said that you partner with schools. How is that getting into schools and everything? And
for the store?
Right. Just for the program itself.
To get into Cottage Cove's program, you don't have to be through one of the schools that's next to us. We have a few people that just ask if, can I get my kid into your program?
Okay.
But when we moved into a neighborhood, we always said, this is a school that we're focusing on. So we kind of introduce ourselves to that school and then know that, that school needed the extra help because we know the demographics at the school.
Gotcha.
And then, the schools do most of the advertising for us.
Okay.
So you'll hear from the teachers or the administration, you want your child in this program because they see the result back in the classroom.
Gotcha.
And, we teach kids respect for authority. And so, one of the things that's so prevalent in the culture is to disrespect the authority, and even just by turning away and not looking when someone's talking or, things of that sort. And we teach them that, even if you're in trouble, you look someone in the eye, you talk to them. And so, suddenly they react different to even the teacher at that point. And they're going, teacher's like, how did they get this way? Yeah.
And there's particular hours, I guess, so like a typical day. What is that involve?
It's after school. So,
okay.
And then during the summer, we do an all-day program.
Okay.
And so, really from 7:30 all the way through.
Gotcha.
And it takes, again, a lot of volunteers to make that happen.
Right.
We have right now 5 staff, and we're trying to move that up to 6. Yeah. But even with 6 staff, 3 locations, volunteers. And so every afternoon, if someone's got an hour or two that, they just come in and let a child read to them, help supervise on the playground, just, and you don't have to have a whole lot. People say, what skills do you need or what, qualifications? Not an awful lot. Just care about the kids,
That's awesome.
Is there, you're saying about schools or whatever, as far as that's one of the main things that you go through as far as that alley of getting kids into your program. Do you ever, partner with, say, the mission or any, kids that are in that?
Too far away from us for the most part. And it just, as I said, we were by the state fairgrounds, which was still far away from that. Mm-hmm. And now, with the gentrification that's happening in the city, the downtown core is becoming upscale. Right. And so we've kind of moved ourselves out into that ring around the city. That's why we're in Madison and Tusculum on the south side. And,
Gotcha.
Gotcha. So that's part of Brent's life. But he has another part where the Indiana Jones comes in. So I'll let him I'll let you explain kind of what you do, taking trips, taking groups overseas to Bible areas and tours through that, but also the archaeology and the digs.
Okay. Well, to back up and tell that story is, like a lot of people, I'm an armchair archaeologist to begin with. In other words, I read everything about archaeology, was fascinated with it. And, of course, anybody who's a student of scriptures has got to like history because, there's just so much history and so much of the archaeology ties into that. And so I spent a lot of time reading about it, studying it, and figuring someday I got to get over there. And 3 decades ago, God opened the door for me to have an opportunity to go over. And it was, at that time I did some videography and things as well in ministry. And so it was a Christian organization that actually does biblical archaeology. And they said, we heard you do videography, and would you be interested in coming over and doing videography for us in the Bible lands? We'll be at archaeological digs, be over there for about a month, we'll pay your way. It didn't take me much to say yes.
He said, let me think about that for a second.
Yeah.
Easy
And so what they did was they gave me behind-the-scenes access to archaeological digs and to museums and to just a whole pile of different things. And those contacts, I didn't know at the time I was able to actually continue to develop those relationships and give me that access indefinitely. And
that's awesome.
And so it's ended up that on average once or twice a year, Angie and I typically end up back in the Middle East on some archaeological dig or surveying. I photo catalog sites, and so a lot of my images get used in other publications and things of that sort. And so, and then I was always bringing something back, and people often say, well, how can you bring back artifacts? Well, some of the countries will allow it outright. Okay. Some countries have restrictions on it, but over time, we got classed as a private museum. So even the countries that have restrictions, I can get permits for it. I can bring items out of the country. And it started off as a room in my house. And then you'd have people wanting to come over and see these. And sometimes they'd say, can I bring some friends? And then you're trying to pack 25 people into a 12 by 12 room. And
are you charging for this?
No.
You're missing out. You're missing out.
Well, okay, so he mentioned it. He kind of alluded. That was the old days. It used to be in a extra room in his house,
right?
But it has since expanded. So I'll let him tell what the expansion has been.
Well, about 10 years ago, I got this idea that I really needed more space for that, and I figured I'll add an extension on the house if the city would allow it, and they did. There's some conditions on that, and so basically, I have a museum attached to my house.
That's awesome.
And started as a 10-year project. We actually got it done in 3.5 years, so we were way ahead of schedule.
Nice.
And but have just so much more of it out on display now, and so you can actually come in and see the artifacts. Any museum that doesn't let you touch stuff is no fun whatsoever. And so, if you haven't held something that's 2,000 years old, you're missing out. So, those are things that I let you do.
That's great.
And when he describes it as a museum, that is not an exaggeration. I've been there. It is a museum, but just like he said, it's without the red velvet ropes keeping you back. You walk right up to the, artifact, and they are displayed well in glass cases and other forms depending on the artifact. But then he'll bring something out. Oh, you want to touch that? Let me put this in your hand. And he has brought several things with us to show and share today. This is like
nice.
show and tell at school.
Nice.
Man, this is an
Taking
awesome
me back.
thing.
Favorite day of the year.
I know. So why don't you tell us a couple other things that you've brought and show that, and we'll put some close-up pictures of this on the old YouTube as well.
Well, in 1 Corinthians, Paul talks about seeing darkly or dimly in a mirror. And so I decided to bring a mirror with me, and it's a bronze mirror. And this one is about 2,400 years old.
Don't drop it, Ronnie.
Don't drop it.
And you can hang on to it. Now, imagine all the polishing you could do on the bronze, and I mean, it would start to look more coppery the more that you polished it up. And so like the green is the patina that's over time on it. And then it's been stabilized with a chemical that actually makes the gloss on it.
Wow. Here, I'll put this down.
Think of the best copper that you could get polished, and you'd get a little bit of an image out of that.
Yeah.
Right.
But you're not seeing too much. It's not a mirror the way we think of a mirror.
Absolutely not.
I guess people always thought they had a really good figure at that point. They didn't know what they were looking at.
Now, and it's not the only mirror that I have in the museum. This one is Scythian, and the Scythians actually produced, and so did the Loresh people. There were some regions that produced a lot of the bronze, and then they ended up in the Roman world, and it ended up in the Roman world. And I have another mirror that was actually buried with a woman, and it was part of her grave goods.
Oh, wow.
So that's one you'd have to come to the museum to see.
Wow. That's
That's
an
awesome.
invite.
Sign me up.
That is, yeah.
We'll take a podcast field trip.
We'll
Yes.
take a road trip anytime.
These cameras are
Wanting one of
definitely.
So before we get into some of the other artifacts, and they all have a story to go with them, which is awesome. You do allow people to come into the museum, correct?
Yes, yeah, and my conditions with the city, I couldn't have regular open hours for it, so it's not like it's staffed in regular hours. You have to call me and say, interested in coming, I'll set up a time. And so that's really the only condition on it. So, you can call or email me and just set up a time. And it doesn't matter to me if it's just a couple people or if it's 20 people. I can do the 20, 25 easily now. So, yeah.
He can.
He said I got the room now.
Yeah.
Go.
So you can reach out to us, podcast@parkwaybc.net. Email us, and we will give you contact information for Brent. Or you can also find him on Cottage Cove on their website and reach out to him through that. Either way, if you are in the Nashville area and would like to make a visit over to the museum, you will not be disappointed. And whatever we talk about on this episode today, tip of the iceberg, boys. There is so much more, and he is full of stories in a good way.
And it's not always just things for adults either, because I bring the Cottage Cove kids. And
sure,
you know, so I've got a wide range of things that are of interest to younger kids as well, and beyond, of course, biblical artifacts. I also got quite a wide range of fossils.
Okay.
Oh yeah, some cool ones. So, what's something else that you have that you brought with you? I know I asked you to what you're reaching for. I think is one of the things I asked you to bring.
Yeah, coins, of course, are one of the things that you find a lot of, and I mean, most of the countries in the Middle East now have actually banned metal detectors because everybody and their dog was out there with a metal detector, and it's too easy to dig up sites and stuff, so they just ban them, and sometimes they're found as troves. The building was knocked down, it was burned or whatever, and you know it's not like there was banks the way we have banks today. And so often you had an entire jar of coins that you had just taken out a rock in your wall and put it behind that, and if something happened to you, nobody knew it was there, and that you find that whole trove of coins. And and then some are just found in the cracks, literally. And it's very easy when it's a small coin, and this is one of those. This was found near the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and it is a widow's mite. And, you know, when in the Bible it talks about the widow that gave all that she had, this is the type of coin that she would have had. And it's from the right era. Could have been one of hers, but, you know, no guarantees. Not inscribed. And it's
that's really cool.
The official name of the coin is a lepton, and it was a cheap coin. It took a handful of those to buy bread, and bread's one of the cheapest things you could buy. Wow.
What is this made out of typically?
It's bronze. It's the same as a mirror. Just the quality of it was the cheapest bronze you could get.
And forgive me, how old is this?
That one is from around the time of Jesus.
Wow.
Oh, okay. All right.
Wow. Yeah. So when you go on these, do you have to get like clearance to like dig?
Yes.
I guess so.
Yeah,
you have to. So you have to go through. What is that process? And forgive me if that's a dumb question or anything, but just what is that process on if you decide to go somewhere? What do you have to?
Varies by every country.
Okay.
For example, in the middle of COVID last year, when everybody wasn't going somewhere, on spur of the moment, I said to Angie, "Want to go to Egypt?" And people say that's possible, and we ended up in Egypt in the middle of that, and got great connections in Egypt. And I just called up the right person, and they said, "Well, digs are all shut down right now, but we'll get this one open for you." And so, yeah,
very cool, very cool.
Angie is his wife. For when you hear him mention Angie, that's his wife. So,
but you know, some countries are so disorganized. We spent some time in Sudan. Okay. And Sudan is, well, first off, most people go, you can go to Sudan. And I mean, Sudan was on, watch list for the U.S. not to be there.
Right.
And, but there, depending where you are in the country, there's very little control over the antiquities. And there's people that are literally just going in and raiding sites.
Oh, wow. Okay. Wow.
So once you're into coins, I brought two from Israel. The other one that's mentioned in the Bible quite regularly is a denarius. And it was a day's pay for a labor. It's a silver coin.
That's crazy.
And Jesus said to render unto Caesar what Caesar's, whose inscription image is on it. You see Caesar on the back of the coin. Yeah. So again, you're hanging on to an item that's 1,900 years old.
Wow. That's just mind-blowing.
And we'll put some pictures of all these coins on, or all the artifacts on YouTube and Instagram as well.
So, like at that time when they're making this, at that time, I mean, there's not like such banks, right? Or is it like people are just making these in their houses, kind of thing, to make money?
No, the government controlled that, and Rome in particular. If it was a silver coin, it had to be minted by Rome. Rome didn't allow the provinces to do their own silver coins. Gotcha. And so some of the bronze coins, like this widow's mite, it's a bronze coin. It could be done locally. And some of these were done under like Festus, or some of the guys mentioned in Scripture. They had their own of these made because they were allowed to do that. So.
Wow.
Of course, beyond silver coins, there are gold coins. I didn't bring any gold coins, but museum I can show you some gold coins as well. And they're just, as there is today, wasn't that many in circulation. And depending on the region, if you're talking Galilee, Galilee was poor. Almost anything you're going to find in Galilee was bronze coins.
Yeah.
And then, going back further, we think of coins.
My bad. There's me.
Okay. I thought you were shaking your head at him, and I was like, what did he do?
I just threw my headphones into the microphone.
Okay.
My bad.
Headbutted the microphone.
You can tell we're real professional.
Yeah. We're relaxed. So, when you're relaxed, things don't always go right.
Earlier I was looking down, and I came up and hit my brim of my hat across the mic, and I was like,
nice. Rookie.
Coins that are minted today, they use molds to do them, and they heat it, and they're pristine. Every coin looks the same, and those coins I passed around to you, they were pretty jagged around the edge. They were that way when they were done back then, because they'd use a two-sided mold and a hammer and hit it. Yeah. And if you missed or hit half on, you get a half strike. Sometimes the guy would hit it accidentally twice and it moved a little bit and you get a double strike on it. And I've got some of all of those as well, just to show.
Wow, that's great.
But when coins were first coming in, 5th century BC, the oldest coins looked more like slugs and just chunks of silver. And that's a siglos, and that is from the Persian Empire, time of Queen Esther. And so you see one side's got an image on it, and you'll never figure out what it is.
Right. That's what I was trying to look. I was trying to what in the world?
It's a king holding a bow running.
Yes. Okay. I see it. I see it now.
Yeah.
Looks like Ryan's daughter Lily drew that.
Right, clear.
And the other side just looks like an indentation, and it's because it was the hammer. You just see where the hammer struck the one side. They were only putting the image on one side of it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, obviously you're not selling these, but, if people were trying to – I'm assuming people are still looking for these and trying to sell. Are they very valuable?
Some of them can be.
Okay.
And, bronze coins not as much. And now that said, a widow's mite in the condition of this one would probably sell for about $60 or $70.
Oh, wow.
So,
wow.
Of course, coins with silver have more value just because they're silver to begin with.
Because of what they're made out of.
And it really comes down to who's collecting them, because there's some rulers nobody really cares about, and there's no demand for their coins. And if you have a coin that is one of the key people like Vespasian, who was ruling at the time the temple was destroyed, everybody wants those coins.
Right.
And so, you can see coins that go for $1,000 or $1,500 or $2,000 for single denarius.
Wow.
Crazy.
That is.
And you may notice some of the pronunciations, whatever the correct term is for Brent. Sounds a little different. He is originally from our friends up north. He is Canadian, born and bred, and then relocated down south. So,
nice.
What brought you down south?
Cottage Cove.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
We lived and traveled on the road for 10 years. We were in a different place every week. And my son Barry actually grew up thinking that was normal.
And he still does some traveling today. Not quite as much.
Yeah.
Gets it honest.
Yes.
And then the last coin out of the ones I brought, this one is from outside of, of course, Persia we talked about in the Bible, and these ones from Judea, that makes sense. Mm-hmm. This one is actually from Syria and Damascus. Oh, wow. Quite specifically, it was who ruled Damascus at the time when the Apostle Paul was let down out of the city walls in a basket.
Yeah.
And that is King Aretas IV, and that's one of his coins. And he was the king over that area at the time. Some of you may have heard of Petra, the Nabatean city that, of course, it was in the Indiana Jones
Speaking
movies.
Speaking of Indiana Jones.
Yeah.
There you go.
And Petra was a Nabatean city.
Okay.
And so King Aretas, his main palace, if you will, would have been down there.
So Ryan alluded to it a couple minutes ago, asking about prices. Bringing artifacts back, are there different regulations or laws for you to keep them in a collection, whereas bringing them back to resell them somewhere here.
Yes. Many of the artifacts, the governments don't want you reselling. They don't want private ownership of them. And that's one of the things that has really become big in the last few decades, is that they're trying to stop private ownership. They would rather everything be owned by government museums or primary museums. And so the coin industry has been kind of completely different. There's a lot of coin trading that goes on, but even that they're starting to restrict now. Countries like Israel, 15 years ago, you could buy coins that have been found in Israel. There was, almost someone on every street corner that could sell you a coin, and they now restrict that completely. You can't do that.
Another thing I asked you to bring after being in the museum was alabaster in an alabaster jar. Can you show us that?
Yeah, and alabaster, of course, we hear about that in the Bible because of the woman that had the alabaster jar, and she broke her jar and then anointed Jesus. And when you think of alabaster is a stone. And you think, a jar made out of stone? What would that look like? And, there's just a crude chunk of alabaster. And there are different colorings of alabaster as well, but this is your typical common alabaster. And alabaster is found a few other places in the world, but in the Middle East, the primary location that it was found was Egypt. And so Egypt's still big with alabaster. They still mine it and turn it into objects. And so to show what a jar would look like, this is alabaster, a chunk of that stone that has been machined. And so this is done by machine. And so you can take the top off that. And
pretty heavy.
Yeah, it's a stone.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Now, look how thick the sides are on it, too. They've kept it thick on the machine because it's too easy. You get it too thin, it just blows apart, and you got to be really careful because, natural fractures in the rock, whatever. So imagine what it was like to actually make one of these in ancient times, and they didn't have the machines for turning it and polishing it and things of that sort. To do that, you started off with a chunk of rock. You're sitting on the ground. You have that between your feet, and you take another harder rock, and you sit there and start smoothing it on top of it. And to do that, to make a jar could take, for a crude one, a month of working on the same chunk of stone. You make one mistake, disintegrates, start over again.
Wow.
Yeah. And then if you want to do an ornate one or something that's really thin, it could take you 3 months of working on the same container. And again, the thinner the sides on it, the more likely something could go wrong. Wow. And I didn't bring it with me, but I have one that was hand done. It took 3 months to be done, and they did it in the old way. And so I can show you with that one. This didn't take quite as long. It still has fairly thick sides, although they are thinner than that. Yeah. But this is alabaster done by hand. Notice it's not as pretty.
Yeah.
How old would that one?
This is a modern one.
Okay,
and again, there are people still in Egypt that have been trained father to son on how to do this still. And so I had them do me this one. And again, I have one that is closer to what you'd have for a really nice one where the thin sides, you can hold it up and see the light through the stone.
Yeah.
And one thing about the piece that you have in the museum that is much thinner is how delicate it is.
Yes.
And also the expense. What would the expense have been back in Jesus' time?
Well, again, if it's 3 months' work or 4 months' work to do that, you're paying somebody for that amount of labor, besides actually having to go mine the minerals and things of that you needed for it.
Yeah.
And
I'm sure it wasn't easy.
No.
Just to go get it.
And so this woman that had this jar, her jar itself was incredibly expensive. Everybody thinks about the perfume inside of it as being the expensive part. But the jar, and again, came from Egypt. So what was in the jar? It's called nard. Nard is an essence, and essence is something that they do in Egypt as well. And essence is any organic material that has a smell can be reduced to an oil. And unlike our modern perfumes that dry up, and again, if you come to the museum, I'll actually allow you to feel what this feels like because I have some of it.
One of the coolest parts, out of so many cool parts, one of the coolest parts
you definitely
that I
have me
experienced.
Amen.
But the nard is an essence of a plant that only grows in the Himalayas. So her plant that was turned into this had first been almost in India.
Wow.
brought back, so it had to come through the trade routes. You had to pay for all that. Then it's turned into an essence, was put into an alabaster jar, and the jar was sealed, and they would usually use a paste on the top of the stone to actually seal that. And then it was brought to Judea.
Wow.
So incredibly expensive for both the perfume and for the alabaster. Sure. And then because it was sealed, it was a spontaneous thing. The only way to get into it, you'd either have to carve out that seal at the top, and you'd have to sit down and take time to do that, or if it's thin alabaster, it will break, and it was easier just to break it.
Wow.
It adds more depth and layers to the stories we read about in the Bible, and brings real life feeling to those. And the essence that he's talking about, how many do you have about? Do you know?
Different ones, because again, any organic substance that has a smell can be reduced to that, and I've got 9 different ones in the museum that you can actually see what that's like.
And
that's pretty cool.
It's not like a perfume smell. I mean, when you get it, he let us try different ones, and it's a natural. It's kind of perfumey, but it's a natural. Like it's not. It doesn't hit your nostrils hard. It's very easy going on the senses, but it also lasts a long time because of the organic material. Correct?
Yeah. Unlike our modern perfumes that are cut with alcohol and water and a whole lot of other things like that, it's a pure organic, and they've actually found some in Pharaoh's tombs that still has its smell.
Oh wow.
Unlike your grandma's perfume that goes back.
Right. Wow.
Grandma smelled like alcohol. And then you brought another artifact that many people read about in the Bible or other places that are maybe something we don't see often or at all. And I'll let you explain a little bit about what it is.
Well, one thing, the Bible, we're used to having it in a codex format, which is pages. And if you go back to the time of Jesus and before that, it was always in scroll. And scrolls are long. I couldn't bring a whole scroll. Well, I could have, but it would have been awkward. And but if you come to the museum, I have a whole scroll unrolled end to end, and so you can actually see it, and it's up there. But this is one column that's cut out of a scroll. And so, again, you're looking at one column. So imagine multiple columns going both directions from that. You can see where the scribe puts lines on the skin itself, and the Hebrew text hangs under the line where we write on top of our line. And, of course, it reads backwards to the way we read left to right. It reads right to left. And it's on deer skin. And deer skin was the common scroll material. Now, it wasn't that they didn't try other things. Of course, it would have to be a clean animal.
Yeah.
So you're not going to have, pig skin. And pig skin would be nice and soft, unfortunately. But, But one of the things that happens over time, they can get brittle. And this one's starting to get brittle. It's about 350 years old.
Are you okay with us touching it?
Yeah.
And this is a scroll of what? What is this passage?
This one is Exodus, and then I've got a lot of from the law, of course, are the big ones that I have most of mine, and the one that's completely intact in the museum is Book of Deuteronomy, the whole Book of Deuteronomy. Oh, wow. But I also have a small private scroll that would have been in a private collection rather than a synagogue. These were synagogue scrolls, but I have a private one of the Book of Esther.
Oh, that'd be cool.
So neat.
That'd be cool.
And different types of skin, could they stitch pieces together, or did they try to get one large piece of leather?
One of the reasons they used deer was a large animal, and the bigger the animal, the less stitching you had to do. And and yes, most of these were, you could probably get 4 to 5 columns before you'd have to stitch.
Okay.
And then if you did it on a smaller animal like a sheep, you'd probably only get 2, 3 on the outside, and you'd have to be stitching. So, and then depending on the area, if they sometimes struggled to have the right, you could use sheepskin was one of them. You could try goat. Goat was a clean animal, but goat skin is self-rolling. It like if I had this and it was goat, I'd be trying to hold it to lay it down, and you let go of it, and it would just this one will do it because it's been rolled up for so long. But this is softer than it looks. The goat skin is actually very tense, and it'll roll right back up. But I do have one in the museum that's on goat skin, so I can show you what that's like.
What is your most prized, if you have like one thing, like a most prized possession that you've?
Wow.
If you have one.
It's hard to narrow it down to one. A lot of our artifacts have, as you mentioned, stories that go with them, and so a lot of it's the story that goes with it. Some of the rarer items that I have, things with writing are normally the rarest, and the older it is with writing, the rarer it is. And I have a cuneiform tablet from before the time of Abraham.
Oh, wow. Goodness. That's awesome.
Wow.
Something you talked about when we made a visit was most artifacts now that are recovered or found on a dig are broken or in pieces, and it's very rare to have complete artifacts.
Yeah, and again, depends on the item. Oil lamps are a very common artifact because it was the light bulb of the Middle East, and every building had more than one for the most part. And you can often find an oil lamp that's intact or just, the handle chipped on it or things of that sort. And, but the bigger the object, depending on what it's made out of, it's glass. Romans did glass. The Phoenicians did glass even. And glass objects, very easy for them to break. And so the larger it is out of a material like that, the rarer it is. And, I can show you a Roman glass perfume bottle. And I've actually got a couple different styles of that.
When you go overseas or whatever to go and dig for these things, is it typically that you just don't know what you're about to get into, like you don't know what you're about to find, or is there like sometimes where you actually have an idea? Okay, we're going to look for this mirror.
For the most part at a dig, you have no idea,
Okay.
And sometimes because you know what the building is, you have an idea of what you're more likely to find in that. Yeah. I tend to be on the easy side of it, and it's because I'm never there at the very beginning for the most part. I'm there towards the end of a dig because that's when it's best for photo cataloging the site, things of that sort.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
If someone was to go overseas and they're in a marketplace, vendors everywhere, and they're saying, let me sell you this artifact. It's authentic. It's from wherever they happen to be. What would you tell them to be on the lookout for?
Well, when I take a group over, that happens every now and then. Do you have the guy going, I have something to sell, and fake coins are one of the big ones now, and they have some good fakes. Now, how do you age a coin to make it look? They'll even hand strike them. So they'll get some bronze, and they'll hand strike it. But then it has to age. It doesn't have the patina, things of that sort. And to do that, at least two of the countries over there, they'll actually feed them to their chickens. And when they come out the back end of the chicken, the acids in the chicken's stomach have actually artificially aged the coin.
Wow.
That's different.
That's dedication.
That is called trial by error. They try everything and see what works.
Yeah. And then, I can look at if someone has a handful of coins. Some of them actually are scavengers where they've been out actually finding coins and they found them, and so sometimes they'll have some authentic coins, sometimes in a mixture of coins that are there, and I can go through it and go by looking at it. Again, to expose a counterfeit, you have to know the original. So if you know what the real ones, I had one guy come up to me and he said, these are all real, and so I was looking at one and he knew that I was interested in buying it just because I had paused on it, and Angie said, "You're not going to buy that, are you?" And I went, "Yeah, I wanted to buy it because I wanted to show it, and I have it in the museum because it's a counterfeit, and it's a good counterfeit. But it's great to show because it was done as if the coin was bronze, but that coin was never minted in bronze."
Oh.
Stay in school, kids. Learn your stuff. Learn your craft. Learn your craft. So you would take you do take groups still today, correct?
Yeah, and what I was seeing, I'll back up to, I was on a trip in 1999, and I'm standing at the Sea of Galilee, and I like to talk to people and ask what they've seen, and and so one of the things I noticed that most of the people I was standing talking to were older, a lot of gray hair, and one of the things I kept hearing from some of them was, I wished I'd done this when I was younger. Because it does change the way you read the Bible. We filter everything from a Western mindset, and to suddenly see it in its proper Eastern context, it helps a lot. For everything from the terrain to what the cities, towns, villages would have looked like, the artifacts, all of that. And so I kept hearing that, but at the same time, I'd ask somebody, "So what all did you see today?" And they'd rattle off some of the sites they went to, and one guy said, "Yeah," he said, "we went to see Sodom today," and I went, "Oh, so you were over in Jordan?" "No, here in Israel." And I went, "It's not a real site." And yes, there's honest tourist traps,
right?
And I mean, and a lot of people go and think that they're seeing the real thing, and there is an actual excavation of the site for Sodom, but you have to go to the country of Jordan. It's on the other side of the Dead Sea,
right?
And you have that for a lot of the different sites. Some of them, some are close. Some of them have shrines there, and like the Roman Catholic Church built some shrines over what they thought were the right sites, and one of them is the Mount of Beatitudes, and I mean there's a shrine there, and the buses haul in, and they've got all the gift shops and paved driveway and everything of that sort, and you walk in, and you're loosely at the right spot, but the actual spot is actually further down and just a little bit further away from where they are. And you can tell it's the right site because it's a natural amphitheater. Jesus had an excellent spot for teaching a large group of people. And to do that, you got to go walk through a farmer's field. So I get permission from the farmer's field. We walk the field, so we never even pull into the main parking lot.
Okay.
And
that's neat.
And then, the most visited spot in all of Israel is the Via Dolorosa. Do you remember an old Sandy Patty song? Sandy Patty did, a song called "Down the Via Dolorosa," and it was out, decades ago now, and a lot of people heard that song, and they said, that was supposed to be the road that Jesus walked on when he was going for his crucifixion, and so they say, well, this is where I want to walk. And if you ask the tourism department in Israel what the most visited spot in all of Israel is, and they'll say the Via Dolorosa. Okay. Unfortunately, the Via Dolorosa, the road that you're walking on, was not there at the time of Jesus. So you can go walk it.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's not the real road. So if you want to walk on a road that Jesus walked on, to do that, the city was destroyed so many times. And unlike, if we destroy a building, we take away all the ruins and smooth the spot and use it again. Everything was out of stone. If you knock down buildings, you just built on top of it again. And so you can get destruction layers that can be 10, 20, 30, 40. Well, in this case, you've got to go 40 feet below ground to hit the road that Jesus walked on.
Gotcha.
And so I'll take you I'll take you into the tunnels, because there are tunnels that have been excavated, and we'll walk on an actual road that Jesus would have walked on.
Oh, that's neat.
So on some of these trips you go on, you're showing them the area or whatever the sites are where you happen to be. Not everyone is going to dig, correct?
That's correct. And really, it's not generally possible for everybody to dig. If you want to actually go on a dig, you have to, for the most part, sign up for – there's some universities that have programs that you can sign up, and you go and spend a month or 2 months and work on a particular dig. And that's the way most people that want to do it now get involved. What I do is kind of an exception to all of that. And it's a dying exception because, again, the idea of the private person involved in this is something they're trying to keep out of it now. The scholarly world in the West isn't interested at all. I've got good contacts in the East, but over here, an archaeologist, to them, I'm at best a glorified treasure hunter.
Yeah, which is sad because you're doing it for the right reason,
right?
Exactly.
And preserving history, but also displaying history and putting it out there for others to learn more about the Bible, more about Jesus, and have that personal connection.
Yes. Yeah.
We mentioned earlier fossils. You have some fossils in the museum as well. And you told a great story when we came by the museum about flash flood events and some of the fossils you have. Can you talk about that?
Well, one thing that we're often told about fossils is that it takes millions of years for a fossil to form, and that sometimes the burial would take hundreds of years of just slowly sediment building up until it's actually covered the object. And I mean, fish is a great example of that, because we have fossil fish all over the world. And I mean, here in the United States, we've got some great fossil fish beds. And you take a fish, and they've actually tried this experiment. Theoretically, if you follow what's in some of the books, you'd think the fish was swimming along, he dies, he sinks to the bottom, and then over some time, some sediment builds up over top of him, and then slowly he's turned into rock. Mm-hmm. That's what you get from the books. And they actually tried the experiment to see whether or not that was true. And so they actually took a fish, and they found the right conditions, the water that had low oxygen, everything that they said would be the right conditions for that to happen. And they went to put the fish in, and they had a problem because the fish floated rather than sink. And anybody who's had a goldfish knows that the majority of fish actually do float. Yeah,
they do.
So they then skewed the results a little bit. So they actually fastened the fish down to the bottom. And the problem with that was the next day when they came to check on it, there was no fish there. Scavengers had immediately eaten it.
Of course.
And so they now doubly skewed the results by fastening the next fish down and actually putting a cage over this one to keep the scavengers away from it.
That sounds natural.
Yeah. And so then on the third day, when they checked on it, the bones had completely desiccated. They'd actually fallen apart. And yet you look at all the fish that are found around the world, the majority of them, the bones are still fully intact. In other words, still fastened to the backbone. All the little vertebrae are still exactly in their right positions. And the only way that can happen is with rapid, almost instant burial. So you've actually got water, liquefied minerals, everything that is sweeping over and burying. And again, it's something that's predicted by an event in the Bible, the global flood.
Wow.
So it's not to say that every fossil was created by the flood, but a great many fossils would have been created by the flood just because of the amount of water and what it's moving. And we know water moves a whole lot of mineral, a whole lot of rock quickly.
Well, we have just hit the tip of the iceberg. We could have, I don't know how many episodes with Brent here, but if you would like to donate to Cottage Cove or volunteer with Cottage Cove, or if you'd like to maybe talk about putting a group together to travel overseas or go visit the museum, reach out to us, podcast@parkwaybc.net. We'll put you in touch, or again, you can reach out to Brent through Cottage Cove through their website. But Brent, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for sharing just a little bit. I know these guys are excited. I hope the other listeners are as excited, and do some research, do some homework, but also be able to feel that more personal connection to the Bible.
Well, thank you for having me. I enjoy it.
All right, Fondo, send us out, buddy.
All right. Reading from John 12:25 and 26, it says, the one who loves his life will lose it, and the one who hates his life in this world will keep it for eternal life. If anyone serves me, he must follow me. Where I am, there my servant also will be. If anyone serves me, the Father will honor him. So that just goes with, we're called to serve. So in any capacity that we can, thank you so much for all that you do and the lives that you and your program impacts. So good stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And for sure impacting the community here locally and also keeping Bible history alive for many people and many generations to come. So thank you for joining us on GPS to God. We will see you all again next week.
Thank you for listening to GPS to God. Please leave us a rating on iTunes and also subscribe on YouTube. And hit the bell if you would like to receive notifications when new